Interesting. Well, here we are again, Michael. I don't know about you, but it's a lovely day here in Leicestershire.
No, it's not too bad here on the Isle of Man either.
Well, that's good. On one of our previous conversations, you showed me your Coronation souvenir program. It's not quite the same thing, but I discovered this book which I'd never heard of before. It's called Robes of the Realm. Of course, they might not be wearing exactly the same things this time, but I suppose we'll have to wait and see. And the much hotly contested question of whether the king's going to wear military uniform or something else. So we'll have to wait and see. But of course, it's not just the kings and all the great officers of state who get to dress up for the day in their uniforms and whatever. Also, the clergy get to put on all their finery. And I don't know if you saw, but it's been announced that the Bishop of Durham, who traditionally helps support the monarch on one side, along with the Bishop of Bath and Wells, will not be wearing the coat that's been worn for the last 3 or 4 coronations, which was just a little. I mean, I just found a little bit of a shame, really. But you know, I suppose there are more important things to worry about than exactly the coat.
No, it's quite sad. I mean, I remember seeing it up at Durham Cathedral, that coat, and it's a shame it's not going to be brought out. But it is interesting that the coronation was one of the few services of the Church of England which preserved the wearing of copes when they dropped out of fashion everywhere else. They've got some quite ancient copes in the Abbey. I think some of them actually do go back to the coronation of Charles II. And they definitely provided a sort of basis for embellishing Anglican worship, the existence of these copes. They're worn, I think, really because it's a service of Holy Communion in the Abbey. Every coronation has been in the context of a service of Holy Communion. Certainly King Edgar's is well documented as that being the case. I tell a lie, sorry, there's one which wasn't, which is James II, but there were very particular reasons for that, with him being a Roman Catholic and not being prepared to receive the sacrament at the hands of an Anglican archbishop. I don't know whether you've been looking at pictures of the regalia. All the ones I've seen obviously show you things like the crowns and the sceptres and the orb. But if you visit the Tower of London, you'll see it also includes the vessels you need for a celebration of Holy Communion. There's a very attractive pattern and the chalice to go with it. And I believe they were. Yeah, go
sorry,
after
I
you.
was just going to say, chalice and pattern. These are the plate on which the bread is put and the cup into which the wine is put for the Christian celebration of Holy Communion.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're deliberately made as precious items for something precious which is going to happen within them. Every monarch receives that sacrament as a way of supporting and strengthening them following their coronation for their duties as monarch. It's actually quite a sacred and important moment. If you read the press and comment at the moment, they make a great deal of the fact that the anointing is always hidden from view. Well, certainly when they first broadcast the coronation on the radio, and then when they actually filmed it in 1953, it was considered too sacred to show the moment of consecration. That's the prayers over the bread and the wine, and when the actual monarch receives the sacrament. So it'll be interesting if this changes at this one.
Yes, and at the last coronation, whilst for the anointing, you heard the Archbishop of Canterbury say the words of anointing. At the last coronation, the audience in the country didn't even get to hear the words of consecration because they were thought to be at that time so sacred, and you just got a very quiet commentary by Richard Dimbleby and a picture of the back of the altar at Westminster Abbey. I can't quite imagine it's going to be like that this time, though.
I don't think there's quite the same anxiety over it, but they really were considered too sacred to be heard by people who weren't in a sort of reverent disposition. I mean, we often laugh at it, but there's some merit in the outlook that this is a holy moment as well. You want people who are listening to it and hearing it to be treating it as such.
Yes, it's going to be it's going to be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think there are going to be lots of places which are going to be showing the coronation to the community in a village hall, or in some places in churches. I think even some cathedrals maybe. So it'll be really interesting to see how people react to those kind of to the whole ceremony, but especially to those very important key moments of the ceremony. But of course, that was something that about the media age in 1953, that Geoffrey Fisher, although he was that's the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1953, although he was very keen that those moments and the solemnity of those moments were marked with solemnity, and in some cases with not even hearing the words. I think it was a deliberate act on Fisher's part to make very much more of the actual crowning itself. And if you watch the footage, he really holds the crown aloft very high above the Queen's head and sort of holds it there and then slowly puts it on her head in a very dramatic way, which I don't think had been the case in previous coronations, because there wasn't that need for that sort of all of that theatre. But with the coming of the televisual age, that became more important, so that he could actually make a very big thing of that moment.
You may be right, but I had some idea that Archbishop Lang also held up the crown for some time, because there was a coronation film made for George VI.
Yes.
The difference was it wasn't going out live, so there was the opportunity to edit it before anybody saw anything,
right,
which the palace might not want to be shown.
But I think certainly a 20th century media age invention, if you like.
I mean, if you were talking about Archbishop Fisher, interestingly, he got very involved in the practicalities of everything. And when it came at the last coronation to the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh receiving Holy Communion, he reckoned because they were young and fit, they wouldn't need anything to rest on to receive Holy Communion. So if he'd had his way, they wouldn't have had those stools you see them kneeling at. He did, however, take pity on the elderly peers of the realm and agreed that they could stand up with their swords, but they could point them downwards, so they got something to rest on during the long period of the prayer.
Right, yes. And I suppose talking about that moment of coronation, and the anointing just makes me realise that there's so much more that we could talk about, and if we're not careful, we're going to be here all day and well, not bore one another, but probably bore our audience and make it too long to listen to. So perhaps there's still plenty to talk about, that we can and we can do that for another day, maybe.
Absolutely.
Oh, goodbye, and thank you very much for popping in, as always.